Today, we're diving into a really game-changing moment in cancer research. Scientists have literally cracked the genetic code of a super aggressive lymphoma, and in doing so, they've uncovered a hidden complexity that could change absolutely everything about how we diagnose and treat it. So think about this question for a second. What if a cancer's own DNA held the secret to its defeat? Well, that's not science fiction. It's the exact question that drove a huge study on Burkitt lymphoma, a cancer that moves incredibly fast. For years, scientists have been thinking that the answers were hiding in plain sight, right inside its genetic blueprint. But before we get to the amazing solution they found, we really need to understand the puzzle that doctors have been struggling with for decades. It's a puzzle that has put patients in a really tough spot. Right, so this is not just any cancer. Burkitt lymphoma is one of the fastest growing tumors in humans, period. And while it's often found in kids, it can be way more deadly when it shows up in adults. That means getting a diagnosis that is fast and 100% accurate is absolutely critical. And here is the heart of the puzzle. When you look at it under a microscope, Burkitt lymphoma can look almost identical to another cancer, which is called diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, or DLBCL. They're like evil twins. But here's the catch. They need different treatments. Getting that diagnosis wrong has serious consequences. The stakes just couldn't be any higher. So to solve this dangerous look-alike problem, researchers decided they had to go deeper. They had to get past what the human eye can see and go straight to the source code, the cancer's DNA. And they went big. We're talking comprehensive whole genome sequencing on 230 different Burkitt lymphoma tumors. This is one of the largest, most detailed genetic investigations of this disease that has ever been done. The goal here was just massive. They weren't just looking for one bad gene here or there. No, the plan was to read the entire genetic map of every single tumor, hunting for these hidden patterns, these combinations of genetic typos that could finally tell them what this cancer really is. And you know what? What they found was just stunning. The results showed that Burkitt's lymphoma isn't one single disease. It's actually a collection of at least 3 genetically distinct subgroups, and each one has its own unique molecular fingerprint. So the first group they found is called DGG-BL, named after the key genes that are often messed up inside it. And what's really interesting is that this type is very closely linked to the Epstein Barr virus. That suggests the virus itself is playing a big part in how these particular cancers get started. Then we have ICBL. Again, it's named for its key mutations. This is the most common of the 3 subgroups, and it just works differently on a biological level. A huge feature here is the super high activity of a gene called IRF4. Now remember that name, IRF4, because it's going to be important later. And finally, there's Q53BL. They call it the quiet group because it's genetically a little simpler than the others. But its defining feature is a massive one. It very often has mutations in a gene called TP53. And you have to understand, TP53 is basically one of the most important cancer-fighting emergency brakes our bodies have. So this chart gives you a great visual of how things broke down in the study. You can see the 2 main groups, ICBL and DGG-BL, they make up about 90% of the cases. And that quiet Q53BL group is a smaller but still really significant 10%. This isn't just data, it's a whole new map of the patient population. Okay, so this is all fascinating science, but what does it actually mean for the real people, for the patients and their families who are fighting this disease? Well, this is where the research really starts to build a new path forward. For the first time, doctors have a tool that is so much more powerful than just a microscope. They can use this new genetic map to say with certainty this is Burkitt lymphoma and not its lookalike DLBCL. That dangerous diagnostic puzzle, it's finally being solved. This completely changes what a diagnosis looks like for a patient. What used to be a moment filled with uncertainty can now become a clear, genetically defined roadmap. You're not just fighting Burkitt's, you know you're fighting ICBL or DGG-BL. And that clarity, that's an incredibly powerful first step. You know, the researchers themselves said it perfectly. This isn't just a small update to an old textbook chapter. No, this is a completely new framework for how we understand, diagnose, and ultimately how we fight Burkitt lymphoma. And that new framework, it's already pointing us toward a future of much smarter, more targeted treatments. Just think about it for a second. Once you know the specific genetic operating system that a cancer is running on, you can start designing treatments that act like a specific key for a specific lock. This is how we move away from a one-size-fits-all approach and get to truly personalized medicine, developing drugs that go after the unique weaknesses of each subgroup. Okay, remember that IRF4 gene I told you to remember? Here's the payoff. The discovery that the ICBL subgroup is so heavily dependent on IRF4 is a massive breakthrough. It's like painting a giant bullseye on the back of that gene, telling scientists, this is the weak spot. Hit it right here. This is exactly how new, more effective cancer drugs get invented. At the end of the day, this incredible work in Burkitt lymphoma proves that, but reading a cancer's own blueprint, we can actually find the instructions for its defeat. And it leaves us with a really hopeful question. How many other diseases are just out there waiting for us to finally crack their code?